Hello everyone, good evening. Welcome to Hughes Academy Behind the Wrestler. My guest this evening is none other than Mareko. Thank you very much for giving me your time and giving us a little bit insight and a background story of who Mareko is.
Thank you for having me on this. I don't really do interviews a lot of the time, so it's an honor and it's also a privilege to be a part of something special. So thank you for having me.
So my first question to you is when, who, and why, and gave you the motivation and inspiration to become a professional wrestler?
I've always been a big wrestling fan. At a very young age, I can remember probably like around from the age of 2 to 3 when very late at night when my father used to watch wrestling when WWF at that time used to come on late Saturday nights, like around 2-3 in the morning, and I remember I used to wake up looking around wondering where my dad was, but he was in the living room watching wrestling. And then ever since then I kind of been hooked onto it, to wrestling. Watched it from a very young age, from all the way from primary school right up to intermediate, and then I kind of stopped watching it, but then I started taking notice of wrestling again when The Rock, obviously such a typical Islander thing, being Samoan, being a really big inspiration for me to aspire to be a wrestler as well. So I watched it for a while, the Attitude Era. That played a big, huge part of my life, of my upbringing as well, watching the wrestling, Steve Austin, all those types of people. But I'd say The Rock for me was the person that kind of inspired me and had it off for me. And then I kind of stopped watching wrestling for a little bit, and then it wasn't until I watched John Cena versus The Rock at I think it was WrestleMania 28. I think it was 28. And that's when The Rock had just come back after being away from the WWE for 7 years, and then that kind of brought my interest back. So when I watched him do that, wrestle John Cena, that kind of inspired me to pursue it, to be a wrestler. I think at that time, at a young age, I wanted to be a wrestler, but there was no sort of facilities or anything to cater to it. But then at that time when I got inspired, around that time, I think it was 2012, and then after watching that match, I started looking for a wrestling school to train at, and try to aspire to be a really good wrestler as well. And then I found IPW, so Impact Pro Wrestling, and that pretty much started training from there.
You mentioned IPW. How did you go about approaching IPW about training, and how did you find your first day of professional wrestling training, and how did all the experience go?
So when I first started after watching that match with The Rock and John Cena, I started looking for wrestling schools. So I went online and I typed wrestling schools New Zealand, and the first name that popped up was IPW, Impact Pro Wrestling. And then I emailed them, and I didn't hear back from them until probably like 2 weeks after, and they emailed back saying they had a tryout happening. So I emailed back and I said, yeah, that's great, man, I'll be free to do the tryout. It was quite daunting for me because it was something completely out of my comfort zone. I do like to sort of like stretch myself out of my comfort zone, but this was like going far beyond. I'll always remember it. It was on a Saturday morning, and it was around 9 o'clock. I came in, and there were 3 other guys, and one other guy that's still wrestling up till now was Mason Daniels. So we started off together around at the same time. We were at the same tryout for IPW, and then at the end there was only 4 guys that turned up. So it was me, Mason Daniels, another Samoan guy, and a guy who looked like Cameron Furlong from was it Furlong or Furlong from the Terminator. So he looked like that kid, and the training was the tryout was pretty full on. They had Travis Banks running the tryout, and Kingy. And man, Travis really put us through our paces to begin with when we did the sort of like cardio. Man, I was probably fatigued within the first 10 minutes because I'd never done that sort of like fitness before, sort of like that sort of, yeah, just moving my body in certain ways that shouldn't be moved. Yeah, it was tiring. The tryout was for at least, I think, 4 hours. And at the end of it, it was only 3 of us that came through. So it was me, Mason Daniel, and that Samoan other guy called Fiti, and the other guy who looked like Cameron Furlong or Forlong. He kind of dropped out, which was quite funny because he told Kingy that he was just going to go out to his car just to get some water, but then he went to his car and he left. So it was just us 3 in the end, and then ever since then, just been training, wrestling with IPW for a bit.
You mentioned about the tryout and how the fatigue and the workouts and stuff were. My question to that is how did you find the next day from your first wrestling training, where like I'm very excited to go back to my next one, or this isn't for me, or do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so the trial was on Saturday, and then after that trial, the next day, pretty much I think my body was sore for like 2 weeks. I couldn't move my neck, I couldn't move my joints. I was just completely just sore. Every time I went to sit down, everything was just completely sore. But I had to sort of suck it up, because that following week was training on Wednesdays, and they usually have rookie trainings on Wednesdays. So I had to sort of prepare myself mentally to go to that training. So had to try and ignore all the pain that I was going through, and I didn't want to sort of want to be those guys all hype, and so I had to really suck it up mentally, and just go to the next training. But then everything, the more I went to the training, the more I got used to it, and I sort of mentally prepared myself every time I went to training, because every time I went to training there was always something new. Nothing was ever the same at trainings, except for the basic rolls, bumps and stuff like that, which is quite repetitive, and I can understand that it's very important to learn the basics and the fundamentals in wrestling before you actually have a wrestling match. So that was always constant, but the cardio and the conditioning at that time was really hard, because at that time we had Kingy taking it first, and then Kingy stopped, and then Travis had come back from 0-1 from Japan, and man, the stuff and the knowledge that he brought back from going to Japan pretty much killed us. The Japanese mentality of training was really installed into him, so when he brought that back, he tried to sort of instill that into us, and it was really hard, man. It was all about repetition, the squatting. Sometimes squatting got really ridiculous, where it got to the point of 1,500, 2,000 squats in one night, one sitting, and it was really hard. But I used to hate training when I knew that Travis was taking it, but now when I look back at it, I understand why he did what he did and why he trained us the way he trained us like that, because it's very important, obviously, to be physically conditioned as a professional wrestler, but also mentally, because when you're wrestling someone, you've got someone else's life in your hands. And let's say you're wrestling a 20-minute match, and you're already fatigued within 5 minutes, and you go to do a big move, and you mess that up. That's someone's life in your hands, and you're responsible for that. So when I look back, I'm really thankful that I went through that training, because now it's led me to what I am now and how I train now.
So how you mentioned being with IPW for a while, how did you prepare for your debut match, and how did your debut match come about?
So my debut match came about, it was around 2004 14. So it was the beginning of 2014, the beginning of the very beginning of that year, and IPW decided to put me into a tag team with Liger. So I was the other half of the Pride. So that's what we called it back then. So I was the blue Liger, and a lot of people didn't know that because obviously kayfabe wore the mask. After I took the mask off, no one knew who I was. I just walked around normally like a normal person, and everyone was just like, "Oh, who's this guy? Does everyone know who this guy is?" And I was just like, "Oh no, I'm just one of the rookies," but no one knew who I was. So it was pretty cool. So the other Liger was Mareko, and I learned a lot from him too, just in terms of how to be a heel, how to sell, how to work the crowd. It was nerve-wracking, my first match as a tag team, because I had a lot of things going through my mind at that time, just in terms of how I looked. Would people pay to come see me in the sort of condition that I was in, and also how the match was going to work out. And I didn't know how people were going to perceive me, so I had to really, like I said, come out of my comfort zone and sort of just push myself to the next level and try to sort of be at the level that Mareko was at that time in 2014. So it was an IPW show out on Linfield Recreational Centre, and then ever since then I was tag team with Mareko for probably a year and a half, almost 2 years.
With your experience from IPW and being with them and interacting with the likes of Travis Banks and Kingy and Liger, how did you find yourself coming to the Fale Dojo, which you train out of, and how did you come to meet the underboss Bad Luck Fale?
Obviously, what's it called? So training at IPW, Travis had come back from Japan, and obviously Travis had made new friends, and then one evening I went to an IPW training, and that's where I met the underboss Bad Luck Fale. It was at an IPW training. When I first saw him, I was like, "Oh, sweet, another rookie," and I didn't know who he was at the time. So I was like, "Oh, sweet. I'm not the only Islander face there." So he came to the training, but when I watched him train, when he was training along with the rest of us, I was like, "Oh, actually, this guy's actually quite good." So I was like, "Oh, okay, maybe this guy's probably done it before," not knowing who he was and which company that he worked for. Because at that time, all I knew was WWE, a little bit of Ring of Honor, but I didn't know any much promotions outside of that. So, I met the underboss through Travis, and then ever since then, I think I met him in 2013, and then from then onwards, we became really good friends, and then sort of pretty much just always trained in the same sort of circle, like with Travis. Henare, Aaron, was another person who was quite big in my training, even right up until now. And Fale. So Fale was always in the picture after that. Every time, any event I went to or any wrestling event I did, Fale was always there. And Fale would always sort of come up to me and sort of be like, "Oh, so what do you want to do? Where do you see yourself taking this? Do you want to take this professionally? Do you want to take this seriously?" And I said to Fale, "Yeah, most definitely, man. I do want to take this seriously. I do want to take this professionally." Because I knew at that time I was at a point where I was a certain age where I thought, man, it's either I do it now, because if I don't do it now, I'll probably have regrets later on. Fast forward a couple of years later till now, so I've always been training with Fale, but it wasn't until last year where it was really serious, where I started training with Fale a lot. Training with Fale, Aaron, Henare, and Dolo, who is the son of the WWE legend King Haku. So it was that sort of circle that I started training with, and it was really good. We trained here at the Fale Dojo, Yeah, training was really hard. It was probably 10 times worse than what Travis actually took us. Because I thought Travis's trainings were really hard, and then when I did trainings with the underboss, man, it was painful. Like, man, I couldn't, like, the first type of training I did with Travis, I couldn't walk for like a week and a half, 2 weeks. Training with the underboss, I couldn't even walk for like a month. It was so hard to do anything because just the physicality and the conditioning that he put us through was really hard. Obviously, Aaron was quite used to it because at that time he was a young lion in Japan, so that's the type of training they do. So when I started doing it, I was like, oh shit. I mean, this is a whole new world to me. It's quite foreign, but it was a good challenge. It pushed me. We did the show, Sakura, what's it called, on the mat. And then after that, me and Fale got talking for a bit, and I've been training now. I'm the Fale Dojo management, so I manage and run the Fale Dojo when Fale is not here. So obviously when Fale is here, he'll take the trainings. We also got our other trainers as well. So we've got me as a trainer, we've got Fale. We used to have Dempsey Wilkinson, who was one of our kickboxers and boxing coaches, and he's I think he was like a Commonwealth champion as well. He's a New Zealand representative. And then we also got Jordan, who's another wrestler that goes by the name of Jason Brody. So those are our trainers here at the Fale Dojo. My speciality in terms of what I do, besides the wrestling, is I used to do amateur boxing before. So I didn't realize that with Fale, his whole mentality of training was to train up the person as an actual legit fighter. And I didn't look at it. I was like, oh, really? Why would you train someone as a legit fighter? And then he sort of sat me down and said, look, man, if you were to ever get into a rumble with one of these guys in New Japan, they will legit mess you up because they are legitimate fighters. And I said, oh, okay. And then he told me to keep watching their product. So I kept watching it, and I started noticing little things just in terms of the way they moved, what they did, and everything looked so real. And I was just like, oh, man. And then, obviously, putting two and two together, I was like, oh, okay, so this is what the underboss meant. Being trained as a legitimate fighter, not just learning one discipline, but learning all types of disciplines to be, the ultimate package, the ultimate professional wrestler. So knowing how to kickbox, knowing how to box, knowing how to grapple, amateur wrestling, all types of disciplines to mold you into this one type of person. So, I've been training here for a while, been managing the dojo for a while, and I've learned so much, to be honest. I've actually learned, the short time that I've been a manager here at Fale Dojo and trained underneath Fale, I've actually learned so much than I actually have prior to my previous training when I was training at other schools. But here, it's not just the physical and conditioning that we do here, but it's also the psychology of wrestling, why we do what we do, and making things look believable, because obviously we all know that wrestling fans are quite smart now. So if you do one move that kind of looks fake, they're obviously going to call you out straight away. So hence, the philosophy behind us training as legitimate fighters to look like the ultimate package, looking like I said, the ultimate package, and being a really legit professional wrestler.
Just gonna step back a bit. You mentioned about your amateur boxing background. How did you fall into doing amateur boxing and then transition that into being a professional wrestler?
So I started boxing probably at a really, not really young age, sort of like in my sort of like teens, sort of like early 20s. So I started amateur boxing at Boxing Central out in Mount Eden. So that's where I started off. And one of my mates, the reason why I got into it is because one of my mates at that time, I always wanted to do boxing, but obviously I couldn't afford it. And when I asked my parents at that time, they would always be like typical Islander parents, and be like, oh, we have to do the grocery, we have to do the shopping first. and then whatever's left over, yeah, we'll see. So I was like, oh, this is not going to happen. And then it wasn't until one of my mates, because he was a professional boxer at the time, he sort of said to us, hey, well, my other mates, come and I'll let you guys train for free at the boxing central. So we actually used to sneak in, not paying any fees at all, and everyone used to think that we were paying fees, even the owner of the boxing central, but we weren't even paying anything at the time. So I trained there for a couple of years, had a couple of fights, probably like, I think I had like two or three amateur fights at the time, and then I sort of stopped because I was too busy with uni and work life came. Transitioning from that to professional wrestling, at that time I used to think was just completely two different worlds. Obviously it is, but then as I started training here with Fale at the Fale Dojo, Fale sort of asked me, hey, what other stuff do you have? I know you played rugby league before in the past, but have you done any sort of like other physical sports, like contact sports besides league? And I said, oh yeah, I used to be an amateur boxer. And he said, oh, perfect, work on that and try and incorporate that into your wrestling, because when you punch people, obviously it looks really legitimate, as where if someone who's trying to throw a boxing punch in wrestling doesn't know how to box, it doesn't come across as real. So he tried to say to me, he said to me to try and incorporate my boxing background into the wrestling, so that way it just looks real, looks fluent, and it just looks really nice. It just flows with everything, so that way fans couldn't catch me out if I was actually throwing a punch in one of my matches.
Going into your transition from boxing to wrestling, did you find it difficult when you stepped back into a professional wrestling ring in your matches to be more hesitant or be more confident? Did the amateur boxing bring out more confidence in you, or did it let you shy away a bit in the professional wrestling world due to like full contact and all that stuff?
At first, yeah, I kind of shied away, because when Fale originally said to me, incorporate your boxing into your wrestling, I was really hesitant, because I'm not trying to say I'm like a real tough guy, but I was really hesitant in terms of throwing the punch, because obviously in boxing, when you throw a punch, you have to throw it. When you're in that ring, you're not there to make friends. So I was always wary of that, because if I said to fellow, but if I throw my punch, I'm going to actually hit my opponent. So I shied away from it. But obviously with the training and the guidance, I learned how to control my power in terms of my punching when I'm in a wrestling match. And how to control it, how to manipulate my punches when I'm in an actual match itself, so that way I'm not hurting my opponent when I'm in my wrestling match. It's pretty much the same. Like my confidence in amateur boxing was the same back then as it was where my confidence in professional wrestling was exactly the same when I first started amateur boxing. So it's pretty much the same for both amateur boxing and in professional wrestling. So I had to learn how to sort of pick up my game, come out of my comfort zone a bit more, and like I said, just be smart about how I can incorporate my sort of background and other disciplines into the wrestling. So yeah.
Okay. So you are very respectful to obviously the underboss, Bad Luck Fale, and to everyone that you've ever met. My question to that is, what are your favorite moments in your career so far?
Favorite moments for me would be, there's quite a few. One was my debut. So my debut as Liger. So I didn't have a match, but I did a run-in where I can remember it was a match. It was a freeway, triple threat match between Liger, Johnny Idol, and Mason Daniels, and what's it called? I came at the end of that match and I did a run-in, and it was really special for me at that time because I had my family there, so I told my family to come and watch. Obviously, they're big fans. Being Islanders, they love physical contact sport. They love The Rock, so they were just expecting me to be The Rock, and I was like, okay, I'm not The Rock. Okay, so let's not get our hopes up. So that was a special moment, me doing a run-in, doing a spear, Samoan drop. So that was one of my special moments. Another one was at Armageddon, the Auckland Armageddon in 2014 in October, when I had, we had a, it was a pride, and at that time the pride consisted of me, Liger, and Delilah Black, Olivia. So Delilah's part with Taz, who's part of the Pacific power couple. I think that's what I call it. Apologies if I haven't pronounced the name right, but at that time it was us three, and then we had a match versus Travis and Johnny Idol and Carmen Rose at that time. So when I went up against Travis, it was really interesting because I knew what I was up against, just in terms of Travis's training and his level. And the reason why I remember that match so vividly is because I remember he whipped me into the ropes. I came back, and then he super kicked me right on my chin, and I thought he was just going to be quite easy about it, but man, he really kicked my chin so hard to the point where I felt like my chin had dislocated. So I was pretty much like this, like, gosh, what's happening? Because I couldn't move my jaw, so I had to like try and wriggle my jaw. And then from that point onwards, I knew straight away what the meaning of strong style was. So when Travis whipped me again after he'd super kicked me, and then when I shoulder charged him, I really put my shoulder onto it, to the point where I charged him and he kind of went flying back, almost to the point where he was going to fly out the rings. And he really liked that because he came back up after the match, and he really sort of commended me and said, "Oh man, that was really good. We got a really good pop out of that." And I was like, "Oh, thanks, man." He goes, "You're doing really good, man. Keep it up. Just keep going. Keep the training up." That moment, and I think a defining moment for me in wrestling too was meeting the underboss. Because had I not met the underboss, I probably wouldn't be I wouldn't be sitting in the position that I'm sitting in right now. I've learned so much, not just about wrestling, but just about being a really good human being as well. Being humble, being considerate of others' feelings. Not that I'm saying that I never did that sort of stuff, but when you see Fale wrestle in the ring, you'd think, man, this guy's probably a real prick in real life, because he has that habit of like grabbing the mic announcer and just like either ripping off half of their shoulder or just like throwing them out of the ring. But when you actually meet him, he's a really, really nice person, and a lot of his attitudes and his behaviors have sort of like rubbed off on me, in the sense where I don't back in those days I used to be like, oh man, that guy's not a really good wrestler. But I just sort of say it to the people I would trust. Now, if I have an opinion of someone, I keep it to myself, because I look back and I was like, oh, I want people to treat me the way I want to treat people the way that I would like to be treated. So the underboss has had a huge part in terms of why I am the way I am now, in and outside of the ring. So yeah.
Much respect to the underboss, Bad Luck Fale. My question to you is, what are some of your favourite matches so far in your career?
So some of my favourite matches so far in my career have... one was with Adam Taylor, surprisingly, because I never thought that I would wrestle Adam Taylor, because I wrestled Adam Taylor at the time was also at IPW, and then when I wrestled him at one of the Maniacs United shows, It was actually really, really cool because he's currently training at the Kaientai dojo, so he understood the strong style, the Japanese discipline, and the type of training and mentality, physical conditioning that you have to put yourself through to be in a professional match. So when I had a match up with him, it wasn't the most greatest of matches, and I'm just speaking for myself. Adam was awesome, but for me, I'm my own worst critic. But it was great because he understood and I understood the style of Japanese wrestling. That was a highlight. The other highlight was wrestling Jason Brody at another Maniacs show. So that was really good because obviously with Jordan, he's training full time with the underboss here at the dojo doing the 3-month courses, and he's been training in the mornings and then he comes and trains in the afternoons with us. So it was really good because obviously we both have different styles. He's got a different style to me, but we understood each other in terms of how to wrestle and what we expected and what we had to do in the ring. So that was another big highlight for me in terms of matches that I've had. And then debuting at Hughes Wrestling Academy at the Rumble. And that was the first time I debuted on Hughes Academy, which was a great honour and a privilege to be on that show. I wasn't in there long. I think I was probably in that match, the Rumble match, for probably like 3 minutes. 5 minutes until I got chucked out by I think it was Charlie Roberts, the assassin. I think that's what. Sorry, Charlie, if you're watching this. So I got chucked out by Charlie, and then Marcus Cole was there. So Marcus started taunting me outside, and I was like, oh yeah, sweet, I'm gonna get you now. So we started chasing each other around the crowd, and then when I got him, I chopped him in the chest like 3 times, and he took it. And man, I'm not talking like just little chops. I fully gave it to him. So I was actually quite surprised that he actually also stuck out his chest to pop and sell my chops as well. So that was really cool of him to do that. So those matches, big career for me right now. I enjoy wrestling. Obviously having my matches here and training at Fale Dojo and training with the underboss and Jordan and Aaron, Henade, and everyone that comes through here. But also I like wrestling at Hughes Academy for several reasons. And that is, if anyone gets to wrestle on a Hughes Academy show or gets invited to wrestle at a Hughes Academy show, the vibe there is quite different. Every time I walk through, everyone's just really laid back. Everyone gets along with each other. That's just my opinion, personally, myself. That's the way I see it. Every time I go in there, and I don't feel like I'm being judged when I go to Hughes Academy, Wrestling Academy, or any of the shows. Everyone gets along, and it's really humbling for me too, because I get to meet new wrestlers. I get to wrestle with people I've never wrestled before, and that's one of the things, like I said, that Fale has installed into me, because Fale would say to me, even the guys that trained here, like Henade, Dola, Jordan, everyone that's come through the dojo would say, don't judge other people's wrestling matches. Get along with everyone, be professional. That's the industry that we're in, because you never know, one day you might end up wrestling that person, and then you're going to bite your own tongue, because you have to find a way to get along. So that really has stuck with me for ages, because I've applied that sort of like philosophy in my own personal life when I go to work outside of the Fale Dojo, when I have my own job that I have to go to. I don't make trouble with anyone at work. I sort of just try to get along with everyone and try to be diplomatic, because in the end of the day, I'm going to be seeing those same people, just like wrestling. End of the day, I'm going to be saying this, I'm going to be working with these people, I'm going to be working with everyone. So why would you create enemies? And why would you have, why would you burn your bridges? So I think it's really important to be professional, be humble, really help each other out, and especially the New Zealand wrestling scene. and just be nice in general, because you never know in professional wrestling. You may be nice to someone who you may think is just a normal person, when it may be Vince McMahon's nephew or someone like that, and then they may go and say, "Hey, Vince, there's a guy I met in New Zealand. He's a really nice guy," and that's your ticket through the door. Do you know what I mean? And like I said, I know I keep mentioning Fale's name, but he's the reason why my wrestling has improved, my character work, the conditioning and everything, and just the psychology and everything that applies in my life. I'm not saying that Fale is my dad, but like I said, a lot of it is due to him in terms of this industry, and why we do what I do. Sorry, so yeah.
What is your ultimate goal as a professional wrestler?
I think for me personally, the dream at the back of my head is always one day to be in the E. That's always been at the back of my mind, but as time has gone by and I've trained with Fale, it's changed. It's changed where because I've got to see other types of wrestling, and not just the WWE. The world of professional wrestling it's a big world, big industry. I think for me right now, I hope one day I get to wrestle on a New Japan show. I think that's where I'm sort of heading at the moment. I'm not so much too bedazzled about chasing the WWE dream. I mean, although that's the ultimate, but for me right now, and I think pretty much for the end of my wrestling career, will probably always be with like New Japan Pro Wrestling, unless an opportunity comes up with the E. Then oh man, by all means, I'll definitely take it. But I'm quite content where I am at, just because I know that the level that I'm training at the moment with the underboss is of a really high quality level compared to what I was actually training and what I was doing before I met the underboss. So yeah, hopes and dreams, wrestle on a New Japan show, go to Japan, and watch, probably go to a Wrestle Kingdom show. That's pretty much me. Yeah.
So what is next for Mareko at this stage?
I guess for me the next thing is just to continue training at the Fale Dojo, manage Fale Dojo. Obviously we've got other types of things that are attached with the dojo as well, so the merchandising, that we're selling t-shirts through Silver Lion and stuff like that. Continue to grow as a wrestler, continue to grow as a good human being, be a good husband, be a good son, and just get along with everyone. You'll find that if you ever come across me at a show or anything like that, I'll never pass anyone by. I always make sure that I do try to get around and say hi to everyone, introduce myself, and just have a decent conversation. But yeah, that's pretty much me, really.
Thank you very much, Mareko, for giving me an opportunity to do the Behind the Wrestler with you. Thank you for inviting me to the Fale Dojo to do the Behind the Wrestler. We're currently sitting in the office. Thank you for all of the amazing stories and the amazing background to get a better understanding of yourself. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for having me, and big thank you to Tanya and Graham for opening their doors for me to come and wrestle on their shows, because really great people, good hearts. So thank you to those guys, because long story, but thanks to those guys. Those are a big reason why I'm actually on the shows and doing what I'm doing at the Hughes Academy sort of thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.